Robert Redford's hand was trembling. The man across from him wanted him dead. A single card on the table would determine his fate. Morrison told him this was his last chance. He ordered him to draw his card. Robert smiled, that famous smile. But this time was different. This time he was truly flirting with death. The saloon held its breath. Everyone was waiting for that card. But nobody knew what Robert's real plan was. Robert Redford never gambled. He was too smart for that. He calculated risks, made plans, always kept control in his hands. He read human nature, found weaknesses, never left anything to chance. But tonight everything was different. Denver's worst neighborhood, the Golden Eagle Saloon, smoke, whiskey smell, the scent of death. Robert held that letter in his hand, the letter announcing Sarah's kidnapping. Morrison's eyes were ice cold, a psychopath's eyes. The man reminded him that he hadn't drawn his card yet. Robert's fingers hesitated on the deck. If he drew, he would either die or live. If he didn't draw, he would certainly die. But Morrison didn't know that Robert was already prepared to die. It was hours earlier when everything began. Robert was on his horse, returning home from the ranch. Colorado's beautiful scenery, mountains, plains. The sun was setting. He was at peace. For the first time in his life, he was truly happy. Then he saw that man. Tommy came running, the youngest worker on the ranch. The boy said he brought an urgent letter. His face was pale. This was bad news. The letter's seal was black, the seal of death. Robert dismounted. His hands were trembling. When he opened the letter, his heart stopped. The letter read, Sarah had been kidnapped. If he wanted her back, he needed to come to the Golden Eagle Saloon. Midnight, alone, unarmed. Otherwise, Sarah would die. It was signed J.M. That meant Jack Morrison, the most dangerous man, the most ruthless killer. Sarah, the school teacher, pure-hearted, beautiful. The only innocent thing in Robert's life, the only woman he loved. The question stuck in his mind. How had Morrison found her? No matter how careful Robert was, Morrison had been watching him. He had found his weakness, his heart. Robert tore up the letter, the pieces scattered in the wind. Tommy asked if it was bad news. Robert smiled, but his eyes turned ice cold. He said it was the worst news possible. Robert quickly turned his horse toward town. His mind was working, just like the old days. He was making plans, calculations, strategy. He knew Morrison. He'd been hunting him for 10 years. Morrison was cunning, dangerous, but impatient. This impatience was his weakness. Throughout the journey, he thought, how had Sarah been kidnapped? She had gone to school this morning, a normal day. Morrison had made his plan beforehand, so this wasn't just coincidence. Robert settling on the ranch, meeting Sarah, falling in love. Everything was part of Morrison's plan. When he reached town, he found his old friend, Doc Williams, a doctor, but also a former partner, Colorado's best doctor. The most cunning, too. Robert said he needed help. Doc noted this was just like always. Robert explained the situation. Doc put down his tea. When he learned it was Morrison, he said the man was crazy. Robert said yes, and added that he had kidnapped Sarah. Doc thought. He noted that Morrison was dangerous, but not stupid. Robert said he knew. That's why he had a plan. Robert explained his plan. Doc listened. He said it was too risky. Robert noted there was no other choice. Doc asked what would happen if they failed. Robert said they would both die. The plan was complex, but simple. Robert would enter the saloon. He would stall Morrison. Doc would secretly search for Sarah. When he reached her, he would signal. Until then, Robert would keep Morrison busy. Then, improvisation. Doc asked what would happen if Morrison killed Robert immediately. Robert said he wouldn't kill him. He would want to play games first. Doc asked how he knew. Robert said Morrison was a sadist. He enjoyed causing pain. Doc found the plan risky, but they had no other options. Robert was willing to risk everything for Sarah's life. He also had unfinished business with Morrison. This time he would definitely catch him. Midnight. The Golden Eagle was dark, smoky. Only tough men were in the saloon. Hunters, killers, outlaws. Robert walked in. His cowboy boots creaked. All conversations stopped. The music ceased. Robert Redford had arrived. Morrison was at the corner table. 4 men beside him: Charlie Miller, Jesse Thompson, Tom Rodriguez, Big Jim Sullivan, the most dangerous gang, all armed, all ready to kill Robert. Robert approached slowly. That famous walk, self-confident, smiling, but inside he was burning. Sarah's life was in danger. Robert asked Morrison where Sarah was. Morrison stood up. He was a large man, 6 feet tall. His hands were huge, scars on his neck, marks of the people he had killed. Morrison told him to sit and talk. Robert said there was nothing to discuss. He stated he wanted Sarah. Morrison laughed. The saloon shook. He said of course he wanted her, but there was a price. Morrison pointed to the table. Poker cards, chips, piles of money. $50,000. He said they would play 1 hand of poker. If Robert won, the girl would go free. Robert asked what would happen if Morrison won. Morrison pulled out his gun. It was shiny, clean. He said Robert would die. Robert's mind was working rapidly. 4 armed men. No exit. Windows were closed. Back door was locked. Escape was impossible. He only had 1 chance. To buy time. Robert said he accepted and sat down. Morrison was surprised. He asked if it was that easy. Robert said life wasn't easy, but some choices didn't exist. Morrison shuffled the cards. His hands were skilled. He had been gambling for years. He never lost. He said they would play 5-card poker. The highest hand would win. Robert asked if there were other rules. Robert nodded. This made things even harder. His eyes tracked the cards, Morrison's finger movements, his breathing pattern, eye-blinking frequency. Everything was important. Morrison dealt the cards, 5 cards to each. His men surrounded the area. No escape. Robert slowly picked up his cards. He looked inside. His heart sank. A terrible hand. He didn't even have a pair. The lowest cards. But Robert had learned this over the years. Cards weren't important. People were important. Psychology was important. He watched Morrison, every movement. There was a change in his breathing, a twitch in his left finger, enlargement in his pupils. Morrison had good cards, very good, but he was also tense because there was a gap in his plan. Had Sarah really been kidnapped, or was this also part of the game? Robert said it was interesting and that he would put his cards on the table. He stated he was opening. He spread his cards. There was nothing there. The lowest hand. The saloon was shocked. Morrison's eyes widened. He asked if Robert was crazy. Robert said maybe, or that he knew Morrison's plan. Morrison asked what plan he meant. Robert said Sarah wasn't here anyway. Morrison's face changed. There was bewilderment. How did he know? Robert continued. He said Morrison hadn't kidnapped Sarah. Someone else had. Morrison said he was talking nonsense. Robert said Doc Williams had kidnapped her, together with himself. Morrison jumped up. He said it was impossible. Robert said it was very possible. When Morrison sent his letter, He had informed Doc. Doc had also found Sarah and taken her to safety. Morrison's men drew their weapons, but Robert stopped. He said he wasn't finished yet. Morrison asked why he had come then. Robert said Morrison had decided to kill him. Sarah was just an excuse. Morrison asked how he knew. Robert said Morrison had been following him for 10 years. He watched his every move. Meeting Sarah wasn't coincidence. Morrison had placed her there. Morrison's face reddened. He had been caught. He asked how he knew. Robert said Sarah had told him everything. How she took money from Morrison. How she was supposed to watch him. The saloon was shocked. Was Sarah a spy? Robert said Sarah had betrayed Morrison. She'd fallen in love with him, really fallen in love, and confessed everything. Morrison cursed Sarah angrily. Robert said yes. And now Sarah was safe. Morrison was in the trap. At that moment, the saloon doors opened. Sheriff Williams entered, 10 deputies beside him, guns drawn, ready. The sheriff ordered no one to move and hands up. Morrison's men were shocked. They were surrounded. Morrison screamed it was a trap. Robert smiled. He said yes, and Morrison had fallen into the trap. The sheriff approached. He said Morrison was under arrest. Morrison asked for what? The sheriff said for attempting to kidnap Sarah Williams, attempting to kill Robert Redford, and 15 separate murders. Morrison shouted that they had played a game. Robert said the game was real, but the outcome was predetermined. Morrison asked how. Robert said he never gambled. He only entered sure-win deals. Morrison opened his cards. He really did have a good hand. Royal flush. The best hand. He asked how he had lost then. Robert said the game wasn't played with cards, but with people. Robert stood up. He said Sarah wasn't a spy. She was an innocent teacher. But when Morrison followed her, he had also followed Morrison. Morrison asked if Robert had been following him. Robert said for 10 years. Morrison thought he was following him, but actually he had been luring Morrison into a trap. Morrison asked why. Robert said because Morrison was his brother. The saloon held its breath. Brother. Robert said Jack Morrison's real name was Jack Redford, his little brother. Morrison said this was impossible. Robert said he had left home 20 years ago. He had gone down the wrong path. He had tried to save him, but he had run away. Morrison's eyes filled with tears. He said Robert's name. Robert said yes, and that he was his older brother. The sheriff handcuffed Morrison. Morrison was crying. He apologized to Robert. Robert also apologized for not being able to save him. The saloon emptied. Robert went outside. Doc was waiting. Sarah was beside him. Sarah ran and hugged Robert. Robert asked if Sarah was okay. Sarah said she was fine, but mentioned how scared she had been. Robert said he knew, but added that she was safe now. Sarah asked if Jack was really his brother. Robert said yes. The poor boy had gone down the wrong path. Sarah asked what would happen now. Robert said he would be rehabilitated in prison. He would also visit him. Doc asked what would have happened if he had really lost. Robert smiled. He said there was Plan B. Doc asked what Plan B was. Robert said drawing his gun faster. Sarah asked if Robert never took real risks. Robert said of course he did. He had taken one that night. Sarah asked what it was. Robert said the risk of losing her. That night, after the events at the saloon, Robert went outside. Doc was waiting, but Sarah wasn't with him. Robert's face changed. Where was Sarah? Doc approached with a sad expression. He told Robert he had bad news to deliver. Robert's heart began to race. Doc explained Sarah had never been kidnapped. Sarah was actually a federal agent. She had been watching Robert for 3 years. She had no connection with Morrison. Robert was shocked. How was this possible? Doc continued. Sarah's mission was to catch Robert, because Robert Redford was wanted for the Kansas bank robbery 10 years ago. But Sarah had fallen in love with Robert, really fallen in love. That's why she had warned him. She had fled tonight. Robert's world collapsed. Was Sarah's love real, or was she also part of the game? Doc handed him a letter from Sarah. The letter read, "Robert, I truly love you, but your past will catch me. Run, go far away, try to forget me, because federal agents will come tomorrow morning." Robert tore up the letter. The pieces fell to the ground. Doc asked him what he would do. Robert smiled, that old, dangerous smile. He pulled another letter from his pocket. He handed it to Doc. Doc read it. His eyes widened. The letter came from the federal government. It brought a pardon to Robert Redford, because Robert was a secret federal agent. He had been tracking Morrison for 10 years. Sarah was also his partner. Everything was part of the plan, to catch Morrison. Doc was shocked. He asked if Sarah's escape was also part of the plan. Robert shook his head. He said no. Sarah had really fallen in love, and she had really fled, because being a federal agent was one thing. Being in love was another thing. Sarah couldn't combine the two. Robert mounted his horse. He set off into the night darkness. Doc asked him where he was going. Robert turned. He smiled one last time. He was returning to Washington, to a new mission, because Robert Redford never stops. He's always in motion. There's always a new game. And at the end of this game, the winner had always been Robert Redford.